But for Trump to come out yesterday and blame the Charlie Kirk tragedy on the radical left, we have no idea who's behind that. I mean, is a default easy guess the radical left? Maybe, but how do they benefit from him just by silencing one guy? I don't I have to me that's the what the hell happened there and who the hell is behind it? But we'll get there in a second, I suppose. But yeah, I think immigration status or race or nationality is a huge easy default driver that everybody wants to blame.
This is a crazy question, but I have to say it. Based off everything you just said, do you feel that we're a lot closer to a civil war than you ever thought would be possible?
I don't know if I'd use the phrase civil war, Tommy, but I think we are a match away from a powder keg that we don't know how it's going to blow up, and it scares the shit out of me, right? And I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do to stop it. I don't know what to do to even predict it. I mean, look, we can talk about him now, but I hated a lot of Charlie Kirk's messages, but I love the idea of a platform, right? He was doing a wonderful service. He was engaging in discourse and discussion and thought-provoking ideas. I think he kind of picked upon some of the wounded when he goes to college campuses, and he's a very bright guy, very articulate, but he had these canned answers, and he anticipated the responses and all that. But God bless him. He was encouraging discussions and discourse and not divisiveness. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was a little far to the right or way too far to the right with some of his Islamophobe and other positions. But I thought the man was doing the youth and everybody in this country a huge service by encouraging thought and discussion and rational conversation. And he gets fucking murdered. Apparently literally during a time where he's discussing
on a college campus,
the prominence of gun violence.
Yeah,
It's just like, good Lord.
We spoke a little bit about Charlie Kirk, a conservative activist who was assassinated at a Utah Valley University event. He was shot during a Q&A. The killer fled from the rooftop. FBI released, I think, some images recently from the suspect, as well as a $100,000 reward. I believe the manhunt is still ongoing as of now. By the time we release this, things might change. It's labeled a political assassination by officials like Utah Governor Spencer Cox. I don't know if you did see him at a presser also discussing how Utah still has the death penalty. So there's going to be very serious retribution for who, the suspect is and when they catch this killer. From your 40 years of experience in criminal defense, how do these high-profile cases unfold in investigations and trials?
There will just be so much scrutiny and pressure on law enforcement to solve that case as quickly as possible. To me, the biggest, and again, this is just me spitballing as a human as opposed to a criminal defense lawyer. Why? What the hell? Who gained from that? And I get it. The default is the radical left. The radical left is not gaining on this. I mean, the left as a whole, the left is being slammed as causing this and creating more tension and more division. So I just can't wrap my stupid mind around how a shooter or how the shooter benefited from this. I can imagine some things that I don't necessarily want to say on air, but I don't understand the motive behind this. I don't. But to answer your question, Aaron, there will be hyper pressure on the FBI, on Utah law enforcement, and I have no doubt that they'll seek the death penalty and probably get the death penalty because this was a horrible act, no matter what you thought of his politics or his signature punchlines or his rhetoric or whatever. He was a 31-year-old bright guy with 2 kids that no one deserves this. No one.
Yeah,
and any motherfucker that shot this guy does deserve the death penalty.
It's a very like, sad time that we're in right now. And, Charlie Kirk is somebody that, he's around my age and that I'm very familiar with. I don't know him personally, but his content and, I actually have a lot of admiration for the platform that he built and watching him do it from a young age. There was something about how willing he was to be himself publicly, consistently, even though the outcomes of his conclusions I didn't agree with. I actually strongly disliked a lot of his stances. Some I agreed with from a conservative lens, but there's a lot that he would say and spew that was pretty hateful at times. But when I saw that video, it was such a gut check. I couldn't sleep last night, thinking about it. It felt like very wrong. I would daydream about what if I ever walked up to his debate and debated him or saw him in real life? I'm not somebody who has that physical violence inside of me that I'd want to beat him up for the things he said. But there's a piece of me that was I want to get into a intellectual argument and kind of break down some of the things he says because they were very surface level and very race baity and hateful in nature. But watching it happen the way it did, knowing that his family was in that tent with him, it chokes me up because it's fucked up. But what is your thoughts about how these videos get pumped in the algorithms and people can see it? And you mentioned a 13-year-old son that you have that might be intrigued in seeing something like that. You've seen some gruesome pieces of evidence. You've seen some crazy videos in your time. What is your opinion on, how these things get shared and how desensitized people are to this type of content now?
Again, Aaron, after 42 years of doing what I do, I've seen more corpses, more dead bodies, more body parts. I toured the Branch Davidian compound 3 days after the fire, the stench, knowing that 80 people died in the fire. I've seen some shit nobody should have to see, right? And I always joke that it's, water off a duck's back, but at some level or another, I'm sure it's, triggers me somehow, some way. But more importantly, I guess I'm trying to explain that I got a pretty high tolerance for seeing some pretty nasty shit, right? And I had a friend text me that video, and I just revolted in it. But it was obtained off mainstream media. That's the person that sent it to me. They weren't there. She sent it, and I'm just like, good Lord, why am I looking at this, right? And the explosion of the blood. It's just and so we get home, or I get home. He's a grandson, not a son. If I have a 13-year-old, it's an immaculate conception. But we were at home with our grandson, and naturally we were watching the news, and they want to play that. And we're like, Pierce, get out of here, dude. You don't need to see this. Well, no. And I know he's 13, and he probably went straight to his room and got on his phone or got on his computer and Googled Charlie Kirk and why. But why are we putting that out? It's never going to go away. Why should anyone have access to that, and why isn't it muted in some way? It's not suppression. It's not freedom of speech. It's just blood and gore shoved in our face. There's nothing positive that's going to come out of that. I don't get it.
Yeah, there are people in an element, people saying in an element of him essentially, dying doing what he loved to do. There was a big audience there, and he was able to draw big audiences. Again, the piece of it existing, online and forever, essentially an execution of somebody, an assassination of somebody, and hopefully that stuff gets somehow memory banked and tossed away and out of the digital footprint. But how things are online, once it's there, it's kind of always there, and people could download and people can keep it outside of just it being on the internet. But kind of broader theme, tying in some of the January 6 echoes or recent attempts on figures like Donald Trump. Do you have any kind of point of view on these event security failures? Do you feel like there could have been something done to prevent something like this, or is it pretty inevitable when there's like a mark on someone that it's going to happen?
You know, I guess I react to it through a little different lens because I don't have any crowd control case expertise, although I did have a client who was involved in the Astroworld tragedy here, where Travis Scott, his concert, and we had 10 or 12 people killed, whatever it was. And in marshaling through that evidence, what I learned was, and this is a gross oversimplification, and this is I hesitate to say it because it sounds it sounds less than concerning for the victims, but you get enough people together, particularly in an open space without seats, there's no telling what the hell's going to happen, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. I'm sure there was no screening, there was no metal detectors, there was no searches. You just show up, and that was great in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. But in the year of our Lord 2025, particularly when you have a controversial political figure that you just in an outside environment, there's no possible way, and Charlie's death, tragically proves it. There's no possible way that you have enough adequate security. I mean, that shot, I'm told, was 200 yards away. That's a long damn way, right? And staying there for the second, that's not some amateur. That's a professionally trained shooter, whether it's military or a full-on hitman or a combination of both. You at 200 yards, you got to account for wind, you got to account for curvature, you got to account for. I mean, that's not an easy shot, and it was a clean shot, right? So, which I'm sure it was a long rifle and whatever, but good Lord, it's just not safe to be in an outdoor environment where there's a political backstory to it. It's just not.
The assassination of Charlie Kirk seems like it was done by a professional. And if it was a hitman, what kind of buckets are the people who hire hitman? Like, is there a common trend? Is it just very random? I know, like, it's not known to happen too often, but there are notable cases. So I just wanted to know your experience with it.
Yeah. First off, I've never defended a so-called hitman. I have no experience in that world. There is a show on Netflix called Hitman, which is based upon the life of an investigator here in the Harris County DA's office, who's now deceased. Where, and that's let me answer it this way: most of the time, people think when they think they're hiring a hitman, they're hiring an undercover law enforcement officer.
Wow.
There's hundreds of people in prison for hiring a hitman who was an undercover FBI agent or sheriff's officer, police department. So,
can you find a hitman on Craigslist?
I haven't looked.
Okay,
I haven't looked. I will say that the Texas, the most famous hitman in Texas. Is Charles Harrelson. Charles Harrelson, as we've talked about in another episode, Charles Harrelson is Woody Harrelson's father, but Charles very famously was a contract killer for the Chagra brothers. Were charged with in a narcotics conspiracy. They're from El Paso. They were charged in San Antonio, appearing before Judge John H. Wood, also known as Maximum John. They hired Charles Harrelson to kill the judge, and Charles Harrelson did exactly that. Harrelson didn't stop or end with Judge Wood. He killed actually a friend of mine's brother, David Berg's brother. He murdered him. He was a hitman there. He was just a bad dude all the way around. So I don't know if you can hire a hitman on Craigslist. I would think if you could, they're all law enforcement. Maybe on the dark web, but my advice to anyone that's looking for a hitman is don't.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your mentor, Racehorse Haynes, did represent or not defend or had experience with hitman before, right? Or
no, well, so closest Haynes came to defending a hitman was, to my knowledge, was when Haynes's sort of legendary case was T. Cullen Davis. T. Cullen Davis was the richest man ever charged with murder. He was a centimillionaire out of Fort Worth, and Haynes got Cullen acquitted on a murder case where he was accused of murdering his wife and others, or attempted to murder his wife, did murder others. But then after that, he took out a hit on the judge, who was, of course, Cullen thought he was hiring a hitman, but instead he was hiring, just as I've referenced earlier, an undercover FBI agent.
Wow.
So, I don't know how you hire a hitman, and I don't intend to find out.
So to stick with this Charlie Kirk assassination, does it resemble any sort of emotional similarities to the JFK assassination?
I don't know. We don't know what happened there, right? So from you can draw a straight line, no pun intended, to the violence of it, and to the difficulty of the shot. But other than that, I wouldn't draw any parallels to it. What I'm concerned about in Charlie's case is, where do we go from here? What's going to happen? That worries me a lot more than who the killer is or why the killer did it or whatever. Is how are we going to react to that? What the hell is our nation's reaction going to be? Sadly, I know what it won't be, and what it won't be is a greater emphasis on gun control. I think it will have the exact opposite effect of that. You guys are too young to remember it probably, but when Obama said he was going to eliminate AR-15s and AK-47s and take them off the shelves, everybody, including this guy, went out and bought AR-15s and AK-47s. So I fear, and I've never fired mine, right? I have several. I'm like a moron. Well, if he's going to get rid of them, I need to go get one, which is an idiotic conclusion to come to, which is not my only idiotic conclusion. But I'm really worried about how we react to this and where we go from here.
Post JFK assassinations, how was the climate? Was people rioting? Was people afraid, staying in homes?
Well, let's back up.
Yeah,
I'm old, but not that old. I was in the second grade.
Okay.
And when President Kennedy was killed on November 23rd, 1963, I think it was, I was in the second grade. It was around noon, if I remember. And what was going on there, to the backstory for people of my generation will remember, that was the height of the Cold War. And we literally practiced what to do when the nuke got dropped. And we had really safe plans, like hiding under your desk or hiding in a closet. We practiced that in class. Get under your desk. If the Russians dropped a big one, stay under your desk. It's the most asinine thing, but it was a thing. But anyway, when President Kennedy was killed, I'll never forget, second grade, our principal, at the Jonas Salk Elementary School, our principal came over the loudspeaker and said, and you just think about this. You were in the second grade, and the principal comes over the loudspeaker system and says, President Kennedy has just been killed. Please go home. And you're looking around going, what the hell, right? And I remember getting in my Schwinn orange crate bicycle and pedaling home and looking in the sky, because I just knew, well, if they killed the president, the Russians are going to drop the bombs any minute. But in answer to your question, what happened? Was there rioting in the streets? No, there was just nationwide and really worldwide grief. I mean, people were just devastated. They were hurt. They were distraught. But they were dumbfounded. But it didn't cause division, at least from my limited basis to understand it, Tommy. At the time, it caused people to come together, not division, which I think is the exact opposite of what we're going to see here.
Your concern being of the fallout of this, right? Do you feel like this does signal escalating domestic? Do you fear that it signals
100%.
Escalating domestic terrorism?
And I think what Trump did yesterday, within hours after Charlie's death, was just absolutely abhorrent. He was coming on saying what a great friend and what a terrible tragedy, all of which I understand and agree with, But the radical left, this is what caused this, is the radical left, and brought up other instances and blamed the left for that girl's death on the train. It's like, how do you know what? You have no idea what happened. And I'm not saying the left should be absolved from the get-go, but to as a president, your job is to represent the interest of all Americans, not just the right. And to come out and blame effectively half the country for this tragedy, that does nothing but stoke division and hatred and fear. It was the least presidential thing he could have done.
Do you believe? Are you comfortable with your grandson being in a crowd in a bigger, like, in a movie theater, in a concert? Like, what's your comfortability right now in these bigger crowded areas?
It seems to change by the day, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. I do think the outdoor spaces, which were historically, more safe than the indoor spaces. I think that's been inverted now. I think with the attempted assassination of Trump, I don't know if I would put an asterisk by that or not. You can debate that later. Not really important. And now Charlie Kirk, and then we had the terrible tragedy in Las Vegas at the outdoor concert. I mean, I'm a lot more worried on an outdoor than I am indoor these days. At least with indoors, you can control the ingress and egress, right? At least you can put them through a metal detector and screen them, and you don't have to worry about rooftops, and you don't have to worry about drones or whatever. So it's just if the question is, are you comfortable with your grandson going? The answer is no. It doesn't really matter where they go now. We don't have a safe space.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more information being rolled out in real time. I know that they've shared just as recently as maybe an hour ago pictures of what the suspect looks like that are caught on some kind of Ring camera or video camera, doorbell cam or something along the nature. So by the time we might finish this, by the next time we might record, maybe there's
Candace Owens was blasting an end number, a tail end number out earlier. Did anything come of that?
It's all being like, there's so much just information. It's hard to go through what's real and what's not, and where things have gone. I think a reporter recently asked Trump if they believed that Charlie Kirk's killer was a trained assassin, and his response was that he'd rather not say.
Well, that's pregnant, because he's never said, "I'd rather not say."
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true, and it's heartbreaking. It's an awful time right now. It's a terrible time. It makes me really sad because Charlie wasn't somebody who was violent. Like, he had some pretty awful takes, and he spewed some things that I strongly disagree with, but he was never violent, and he always welcomed discourse and debate. His whole platform was built on discourse and debate, and there's a lot of speculation on who and why and what the motives are. Tommy, do you have any other questions as it pertains to Charlie Kirk and everything that we just spoke of?
Yeah, Dan, what I'm curious about, what I'm noticing a lot is you have one side, or not sides, but you have a group of people that are sad and they're trying to grieve this tragic incident, and then you have some people that are saying, he deserved it for everything that he said, and I feel like that kind of mentality is very common for. You can just say that about any death or any assassination, that it's like, oh well, we can just say that this person was a bad person. I'm trying to frame this question right, but what is your take on sort of people sort of giving out excuses to justify an assassination?
There's no excuse for what happened to him. None. No one can create or contrive an excuse for what happened. There is no excuse. It's horrible. Again, I echo what Aaron said earlier. Tommy, I didn't agree with a lot of his takes, but to me, his willingness to engage in rational discourse is what this what we should be doing. And I've seen 1,000 times. Well, you look what he said about gun control. He said people might have to die to protect the Second Amendment. He had it coming. No, he didn't. He didn't have it coming at all. That was an awkwardly put statement on his part. I don't think he meant it in the literal sense that people should sacrifice their lives for the Second Amendment. I think he meant it in the more rhetorical, passive sense that anything comes with a cost. But there were some people that I know here socially that posted, he had it coming. What a horrible thing to say. Nobody has it coming for free speech. No, it's called the First fucking Amendment. They have the right to say whatever they want. No one should die based upon, their rhetoric. It's insane. Oh.
Can you explain to me maybe, or debunk or affirm the whole like first 48 idea that if somebody doesn't get caught within the first 48 hours, I guess like the odds of them being caught go really low. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, I think that's statistically true for sure. In a case like, but again, Aaron, this is not, some kid in Cleveland robbing a liquor store and shooting the clerk. The amount of scrutiny that's going to come with this case is probably second only to the assassination of a federal judge. That human is going to have more heat on him than a volcano could ever produce. They're coming, right? And they will come for fucking years, and properly so. Is that true in the usual case that the more that time elapses, the less likelihood that you'll catch the perpetrator? Sure. But in this case, no, I don't think that has anything to do with anything.
Okay, and I'll close this segment off with a hypothetical just because I'm curious how you'd handle it. But if, let's say, the shooter walks into your office right now and said, Dan, I need some representation, how would you handle that?
100%. I'd defend him all day long. That's my job. And unless the worst of the worst is properly defended, no one else will be. I mean, that's the litmus test for a good criminal defense lawyer is taking on the worst of the worst. Defend him in a second.
No hesitation.
None. The only hesitation I would have is for the safety of my family, right? That's the only hesitation. I would defend him in a second. I would certainly discuss it within my family.
So it's going to be multiple seconds now.
Yeah, that would be multiple seconds. But from a moral standpoint or a professional responsibility standpoint, in a second.
And you're, absorbing that video that we talked about, understanding the context that we know, the profile of this, that this is very, very global, international. None of that sways you in your principles of what you just mentioned in terms of that litmus of being in the criminal terms.
Not at all. I mean, and this is a silly parallel, but I'm still getting death threats and hate mail over representing Epic, right? So
crazy.
Can you imagine the sort of heat that would come on representing somebody accused of that murder? Jesus, God in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, following it up from Epic too. I mean, you would be the worst of the worst for that. No, that's insane, and it's honestly a pretty awesome answer in a lot of ways, because that conviction in your craft is just like it's super admirable to me. Like, obviously, what this person did, I don't know if there's a justifiable excuse from a moral standpoint, but by the way this nation was founded, he still has
let me say it this way. Would I defend him? In a second. Do I think the motherfucker deserves the death penalty based upon what I understand? In a fucking second.
Totally. So, again, generally from my experience in observing things like this, it doesn't ever feel like a person like this goes to any kind of trial. It feels like they usually die somehow, some way before anything happens.
I think the odds of him being taken out in an arrest, whether self-inflicted or otherwise, are off the charts.